Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, your slow TV English class from the Meeting Point, broadcasting not only to Bilbao but throughout the world. And in today's programme we'll be looking at one of your typical mistakes. We'll also be looking at some pronunciation problems. Last week we were discussing the letter R. This week we're discussing how it combines with certain vowels to make long vowel sounds of R, and or. And we've also got a lot of amazing facts on the topic of discussion this week, which was risk. So we'll be talking about a parasite that makes you lose your fear, especially of cats. And the dangers of sleeping under a walnut tree, of all things. And of course, we'll be having a lecture from our celebrity guest speaker who's back with us again this week. So let's begin with the typical mistake. Many people say this: she married with an Italian. No, not so. The correct form is she married an Italian. There is no preposition. However, we could use the preposition to, but be careful. She married an Italian. This married in this sentence is a verb. She married an Italian. If we use it as an adjective, like in this sentence, she is married to an Italian. This is not a verb. This is an adjective, in which case we use the to. So we could also say she got married to an Italian. Okay, so there's two ways of saying this. Either she married an Italian or she got married to an Italian. They both mean the same thing. But if you use the got, that married is actually an adjective, in which case we use the to. She got married to an Italian, but never with. So for this week's pronunciation, we're going to be looking at some vowel sounds. Now here is a chart showing the 12 main vowels in English. There are, of course, another 8 diphthongs, which we'll have to look at in the future. And of this chart showing the main 12, we're going to be looking at these 3 in the corner. You see these have little dots next to them, which means they are longer vowel sounds. And we'll be looking at the R, the and the or. So first of all, let's look at R. R. Everybody say R. So usually this will be with an A and an R, like in the word car, for example. Car, far, etc. Usually with AR. In some forms of English it could just be an A. Like in southeast England you get words like father, castle, with that long A sound. It's quite long compared to father, castle that you find in other pronunciations. So sometimes it could be just the A, but usually it's AR. And as I was telling you last week, you probably don't hear the R unless it's followed by another vowel. So in a word like car, you've got the K at the beginning, and then you've got R. Right? So it's only 2 sounds. It's not K, R, not kar. It's car. Now let's look at the It's probably with an ER, like her. It can also be spelt with IR in words like bird or birth or third. It could have a UR in a word like turn. Turn. So the sound is usually ER, IR or UR. That is the sound And again, we're putting the R and the vowel together to make one long sound. So in a word like bird, for example, you say b, d, not b, r, d, not bird. Okay, bird. Now the same goes for the or sound, but with the or, we have lots of spellings that are possible for this one. Of course, you have or, for, and again, f, or, not for, not for, or it could be for like the number, four. Words like for and pour, they have the same or sound. Or it could be with oar in words like boar, being like a wild pig, or double or like in door. It's all exactly the same. Another common one is all in all and tall, wall, ball, fall, all those all words, except for shall, of course. So that's a common spelling as well. And of course, aw in words like law, or poor. Okay, so there are many different spellings for this or sound, so it's quite common. So you need to learn to do this long or sound. There is another strange one here at the bottom of this list. I'm going to add war, which is with an AR, which is very unusual. You would think it would be war like car, yeah, but it's not. This W does strange things. It changes the R sound into a OR sound. So WAR is pronounced war to rhyme with for and door. And also, when you've got WOR, it's pronounced in words like word and world and worm. They all go under the list. They look like they should be in the or list, but they're not. So be careful when things begin with a W. It often changes the vowel sound that's following. So those are 3 long vowel sounds that you need to learn. R, or. And remember, you probably don't pronounce the R unless there's a vowel coming up afterwards. So we might say, as I told you last week, for example, you might hear that R sound reintroduced there. But usually you're not going to hear the R. ID cards. ID card. ID is short for identification. Identification. Why do we say that? So, as promised, we've got a lot of amazing facts this week, and yes, they are amazing. They're not just quite interesting. These are truly amazing. The first one is a parasite called a Toxoplasma gondii parasite, which reproduces inside cats. And it comes out of a cat through cat excrement, cat poo, and it gets into the ground, it gets into water, it gets on your food, and the idea of this parasite is that it gets into rats and mice, it gets into their brain, and it does something to the amygdala of the brain, and rats and mice lose their fear of cats, which make them easier to catch from the cat point of view. So the cat eats the mouse and the thing starts again. The parasite keeps going, and that is the circle of life for the Toxoplasma gondii parasite. This is very interesting. Unfortunately, 30 to 50% of people might also have this parasite inside them. They think it's probably not that harmful, but there is some research that suggests that we might lose a certain amount of fear and our sense of judgment might be impaired. And I've seen a documentary where they were testing people that died in motorcycle accidents, and they found a large percentage of them were carrying this parasite. So if you're a reckless, wild person that has a bad sense of judgment, especially where danger is concerned, it's probably because you got a bit of cat poo in your food. Ugh. The next amazing fact about risk is the story of the time when Ben and Jerry's ice cream company, they found trace amounts of glyphosate in their ice cream, which was a common herbicide which apparently had got into the ice cream via the corn syrup that was used. So of course there was a huge panic. People stopped buying the ice cream because it had herbicide in it, and they had to withdraw a lot from the market. But of course these were only trace amounts of this herbicide, which was measured in parts per billion. So in the Neil deGrasse Tyson book, Starry Messenger, he does the calculations and he worked out that you would have to consume 400 million pints of this ice cream before you reached the lethal dose. However, you would die after the first 20 pints because of the fatal levels of sugar that you would have consumed. So it just goes to show the things we're familiar with, we don't consider them dangerous, even though things like sugar and salt are actually quite dangerous to our bodies. But we consume them in large quantities without worrying about them. As soon as you mention herbicides, everybody goes into panic. Somebody else was telling me this week about the dangers of sleeping under nut trees. So I thought, what on earth are they talking about? So I did some research. It's walnut trees, apparently. Walnut trees, especially the black walnut tree. If you do sleep under a walnut tree, they do produce a chemical called juglone. Juglone doesn't sound much like a chemical, but there you go. And it can affect other plants around and animals too. So it's found in the roots, the leaves and the husks, and the vapour may irritate some people with sensitivities. It's unlikely to be dangerous to people, but they do say that prolonged exposure can potentially cause mild respiratory or skin irritation if you are a sensitive individual. So this folk tale of the dangers of sleeping under walnut trees does contain an element of truth, but to be honest, it's not really going to kill you. Far more dangerous being hit by a falling walnut, I would imagine, though not as dangerous as a falling coconut, as you probably already know. Now, here's something quite interesting on the topic of risk. This is called a Bill of Mortality, which is a record of all the people that died in London in 1 week. And this one is from 1665. And you can see all the different things that people died of. And it really is quite interesting, especially with regard to the conversation we had recently in the meeting point about things that people used to die of which are no longer dangerous to us today. For example, here we have one person died frighted. Means they were frightened to death. So I don't know what caused that person to die of fear, but that's very interesting. Another person died of grief. So that's just sadness, really. Somebody here died of falling down the stairs. Up here, somebody died of lethargy. If you're lethargic, you just don't have any energy or you're very lazy. So this person just died because they just didn't have the energy to continue. This one's quite interesting. Murdered at Stepney. Now this is an old spelling of murdered. And you know the other day when we were discussing the TH sound of V, and I said most people here would just replace it with a D. Well, it seems that the word murdered has followed the same pattern, because whenever you see it in very old writing, it's always with the TH. Murdered. But in modern English, it's murdered. So if you change THs to Ds, you're not the first person to do it. Plague was the big killer. 3,880 people in 1 week. That's quite amazing. What else do we have? We have sore leg, which somebody had a pain in their leg and they died. Stone, I don't know what kind of stone that is. Stopping of the stomach. Suddenly, there you go, there's a good way of dying. Suddenly, nothing more, it just died. Surfeit. Well, normally surfeit is when you have too much of something, but what they had a surfeit of, I have no idea. Teeth. A lot of people died of teeth. And then you've got all kinds of strange things there. Another interesting thing at the bottom there, nothing to do with why people died, but it's always on these things, is the law about the size of loaves of bread. And they did a strange thing in these days, that the authorities determined how big a loaf of bread should be, because the loaf of bread always cost a penny. So you went with your penny to the bread shop and you exchanged it for bread, but they never changed the price of the bread, they just changed the size. So it was just called a penny loaf, and it just got bigger and smaller according to the price of wheat, I suppose. Anyway, that's not amazing, but I think it is quite interesting.
Spinning is the fun new activity sweeping the nation. For years, I felt that my life was so empty and meaningless. Then one day, a friend of mine recommended spinning. Since I took up spinning, my life has been transformed. When I go spinning, I feel so liberated. And my newfound freedom just makes me want to spin some more. Now everyone is spinning. Whether you're spinning alone or with your children. Out in the open air or at home, alone or with your friends. Spinning is the fun new activity made for you.
So here's a game for those of you that attended the Friday evening quiz session. You'll know how these games work. All you have to do is look at these dangerous activities and think how many people every year die with these causes. Okay, and you're going to list them from the least dangerous to the most dangerous. So we have airplane crashes. How likely is it to die in an airplane accident? Lightning strikes, and as you know, 8 out of 10 people that die of being hit by lightning are men. Horseback riding accidents. Now this is obviously a bit of American information here because it says horseback riding. We just call it horse riding because we don't feel the need to specify which bit of the horse you sit on. I think we all know we sit on the back of the horse, not on the horse's head, but for some reason Americans need to call it horseback riding. Anyway, that's quite a dangerous activity. Then we have a modern one, selfie-related incidents. How many people every year die taking selfies? Skydiving accidents, so that's sort of parachuting. Bee, wasp and hornet stings. So a bee is the insect that makes the honey. A wasp is related to the bee, but it doesn't make honey. It just annoys you when you're having a picnic. And a hornet is a very big wasp. So how many people die being stung by those insects? Drowning. There's a lot of water in the world. Presumably people fall in rivers and fall off of boats, etc. Another falling one, falling down the stairs. As we discussed in class, falling down the stairs is one of the most dangerous accidents you can have at home. Shark attacks. Are sharks really as dangerous as we might think after watching the film Jaws? And finally, occupational hazards. How many people die at work? So you may press the pause and have a little think about that. So here are the results. Shark attacks. 5 or 6 people every year die of shark attacks. But selfies, 25 to 30 people apparently die taking selfies. So they are eliminated from the gene pool. Skydiving accidents are next. So if you do these dangerous hobbies like leaping out of aeroplanes, there is a chance that the parachute might not open and you might die. Slightly more dangerous, bee and wasp stings. 60 to 70 people every year are dying of bee and wasp stings. About 100 people are falling off of horses, or I guess being kicked by horses. Quite dangerous if you get kicked by a horse. Aeroplane crashes, quite a broad scope here, between 300 and 500 normally, quite a range. That's just an average on over the course of a year. Falling down the stairs, much more dangerous than flying aeroplanes, about 12,000. Apparently that's a very vague estimate because it's very difficult to tell. But my computer came up with about 12,000 fall down the stairs and die. Lightning strikes, twice as dangerous as falling down the stairs. And then drowning. Look at that, look. 236,000 people, approximately, drown every year. Swimming pools, rivers, in the sea, lake accidents, all kinds of things. And then finally, occupational accidents. 330,000 people every year die at work. So, of all the activities that you do, going to work is the most dangerous. So it should be avoided at all costs. Of course, it depends how dangerous your work is. And of course, everybody goes to work, so that's why the statistics are so high. It's not really as dangerous as the statistics might tell you. It's just that not many people are jumping out of aeroplanes by comparison. So I thought that might be interesting to see some of those statistics, and I think now it's time to meet our celebrity guest speaker. Hello again, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me back.
And you have a lecture prepared for us this week?
Yes, this week's lecture is, of course, on the topic of risk.
Great, so let's get on with it then.
When people think about danger, we tend to focus on dramatic, immediate threats, plane crashes, shark attacks, or violent crime. These events are rare, but they stick in our minds because they're sudden and terrifying. In contrast, long-term risks like poor diet, inactivity, or high blood pressure don't feel urgent, even though they cause far more deaths every year. Our brains are wired to notice what's immediate and emotional. If something could hurt us right now, we pay attention. But if the danger builds slowly over years, we often ignore it. That's why many people delay making healthy changes until it's too late. A heart attack doesn't feel real until it happens. some risks are also difficult to compare. Is it safer to live in a bungalow or on the fourth floor of a building? Living higher up means using stairs, which reduces the risk of heart disease, but it also increases the chance of a serious fall. One is a short-term, visible risk. The other is long-term and invisible. Which is worse? It depends on age, fitness, and other personal factors. There's no simple answer. Governments try to offer guidance on certain risks. We're told how many alcohol units are considered safe. But what about driving? There's no official advice about how many kilometers it's safe to drive each week, even though road traffic kills over 1 million people a year worldwide. Some risks are just harder to measure and easier to ignore. If we tried to avoid all risk by retreating from the outside world, we'd only invite new dangers: loneliness, physical inactivity, and declining mental health. Instead of aiming to eliminate risk entirely, we need to understand which risks are worth taking, which can be sensibly avoided, and how to strike a healthy balance in between. Interestingly, while many of us go to great lengths to avoid risk, others actively seek it out. From extreme sports to high-stakes careers, some people are drawn to the adrenaline and excitement that danger brings. For them, risk isn't just something to be managed. It's part of what makes life feel meaningful or alive. What feels reckless to one person might feel like freedom to another. In the end, life itself is risky. None of us get to stay here forever. While it's wise to avoid unnecessary danger, constant worrying may do more harm than good. Fear can narrow our lives, while a calm understanding of risk can help us live life more fully. Sometimes the healthiest thing we can do is accept a little uncertainty and get on with living.
Well, thank you very much for a very informative lecture there from our celebrity guest speaker. And that's about all we have time for this week. We've finished our topic of risk. Next week we'll be discussing diets and food. So as usual, if I don't see you through the week, have a good week. Till next week.